Hey YouTube, Tom Houston Photography here, and in this video I'm going to go over the time I spent in Cambodia while I was in Southeast Asia. And I have a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to dive right in. It was a quick visit. We just wanted to see the temples when we went, so we flew into Siem Reap, which is the closest city to the temples. It's just south of the temples. We got picked up by tuk-tuks and driven to our hostel. And then we woke up nice and early the next morning, and we tuk-tuked to Angkor Wat for the sunrise, which I would highly recommend doing. It is a early start to the day, but it is worth it. We hung around waiting with a throng of people for the sun to rise. We got there around 6 in the morning, probably quarter to 6, and then the sun rose around 7:45, so it was a long wait. I would recommend bringing a tripod if you have one with you. I didn't, so I just set my camera up on a stone railing wall thing and did my time-lapse photography from there, but I would highly recommend having a tripod or else your photos will probably look like garbage. Just because it's the sunrise, so there's not a lot of light. Anyways, moving on. After the sunrise, we tuk-tuked to Angkor Thom, which is more of a city of temples, and we did this because our tuk-tuk driver told us that most people usually stick around Angkor Wat, so we left to avoid crowds and came back to Angkor Wat later in the day. Walked around Angkor Thom after having breakfast, and then we went to Ta Prohm, which is the Tomb Raider Temple, which is where all the trees are basically growing out of the temples. Very, very interesting place to see. I would highly recommend going there. I found it more interesting than Angkor Thom. Angkor Thom was cool, but it just adds a little more character to see the forest kind of taking over the temples. Then after Ta Prohm, we went back through the back entrance of Angkor Wat to see the temple. And that basically took all day. We were there for about 12 hours. My tips and advice for doing photography at the temples is to bring a wide angle lens. You don't exactly need a telephoto lens. Again, depends on your style of shooting. However, the temples are very large and there's not too much people photography. There is some opportunity. However, when you're going to the temples, you're probably going there to take pictures of the temples. Dress conservatively if you want to be able to go into some of the temples. Angkor Wat, to actually get up to the top of it, you have to be dressed conservatively because it is still a temple. So that means your shoulders have to be covered, so wear a t-shirt of some kind, and something to cover your knees, so longer shorts or really light pants. However, most people don't dress too conservatively there because it's scorching hot. In Cambodia, it was over 30 degrees plus humidity, so most people don't really want to be covering their shoulders and covering their knees. However, if you do want to go up into some of the temples, you will have to be dressed conservatively. The other thing is when you're being driven around in tuk-tuks or being near the roads or paths, I would highly recommend covering up your camera equipment because it is super dusty and you will get dust and sand and all that stuff into your camera bag and your camera gear. So I would highly recommend keeping your camera closed and stored away someplace secure while you're driving around or near anyone else driving around, because the dust does get kicked up and that can get, again, on your camera, in your camera, or in your camera bag. And again, it is very, very hot and you are potentially walking around all day, so it is a very good idea to stay hydrated. because you don't want to get dehydrated in a place like that, especially when you're walking around with your camera gear. So that is the temples. I would highly recommend seeing it. It was probably one of the coolest things I've probably will ever see in my life, and I would definitely go back there. The next day, after seeing the temples, we went to the floating village, which is south of Siem Reap. So we tuk-tuk down, it was like a 45-minute tuk-tuk to a river where they have a whole bunch of boats. We hopped in a boat and we went down the river into the lake, and then that is where the floating village is. And it is, just as the name implies, it is a village that is floating in the middle of this lake. So everything is on a wharf or a boat. So there's a floating basketball court, a floating market, a floating restaurant. Everything's floating. It is a very, very interesting thing to see. The temples was it was $20 US to get in, and you get a sweet little pass. However, the floating village was a little bit more expensive because you do have to take a boat all the way there and gas and all that. It's a very, very interesting tourist attraction because it is basically sightseeing people's lives and houses. They don't mind you taking photos from your boat. However, it does feel a little bit weird doing that. It is slightly expensive, as I said. However, I would say it is worth seeing. It's not the most happy thing to see. However, it is very interesting from a photography standpoint. Personally, I wish I had a 70-200 with me when I was there. However, I didn't. It was a perfect environment for such a lens, or maybe even a 24-70. Not a 16-35 though, because you either got all water or all sky, or 50-50 of both, with like this little strip of boats in the middle on the horizon. So with the 70-200, it's a little better because it is basically doing street photography from a boat. Again, I would recommend seeing it, and also the tuk-tuk ride there and back is very interesting because you get to see lotus plantations and rice plantations, and then the full spectrum of houses from the very wealthy in Cambodia to the very not so wealthy. And it's a very interesting thing to see. And if you want to take photos, I'm sure you could, and I'm sure you could meet a lot of interesting people doing that. Other tips just about Cambodia. Well, we also went to the War Museum, so you could take pictures of that if you wanted. However, it was a fairly depressing museum. I would still recommend seeing it because it is good to know what the history is of that area. However, I didn't really feel super comfortable walking around taking pictures, but that's me. We had no power when we were in Cambodia because the power to the city was knocked out by a tour bus. It's the only city in Cambodia that gets its electricity from Thailand, and a tour bus knocked down the power line. So there was sporadic power in the city center while we were there, and our hostel got 2 hours of power the last morning from about 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. However, everything goes as usual pretty much when the power is out, so it's really not that much of an inconvenience, minus you don't have any airflow or AC in the hostel. It was an amazing hostel. It was a Siem Reap hostel, and it would have been so much better if we had air conditioning, but such is life. We still had a good experience there. The tuk-tuk drivers were great. However, when you're driving around in tuk-tuks, the pollution of the cars is a little much at times, and it's also very dusty, so your sunglasses and you just get covered in dust. So again, watch out for your camera equipment when you're driving around with tuk-tuks. old bicycles. But it was a great city, very nice people. And then when we left, our tuk-tuk drivers, both of them gave us their business cards. So I actually have our tuk-tuk drivers from Cambodia on Facebook. They were great guys, took very good care of us while we were there, and they were our exclusive tuk-tuk drivers for the weekend. And they helped us plan out what we wanted to do for the weekend, which was great. And overall, it was an amazing trip. I would highly recommend going to Cambodia, definitely seeing the temples. I would also recommend seeing the floating village. However, my last point I will make is that when you go there, be ready to have a fairly eye-opening experience. This is the first time I personally have been in an environment like that, and it was very eye-opening for me to see. So you do have a lot of mental stuff to go over when you're there, because it is a very different place at times, depending on where you're from. So be ready for that, but get some fabulous photos, and I would definitely go back there if I'm in that neck of the woods ever again. So, as per usual, I'll toss up some photos at the end of this video, and you can check out my videos and all my stuff, all my links down below. And I hope this helps. Again, if you have any questions, I don't like making videos that go on too long, so if you have any questions about any more details from that, please don't hesitate. Just toss them down below, and I'll be more than happy to help you out. And I believe my next video would be on some of the places in Malaysia that I've traveled besides Langkawi. So with that, I will end it here, and again, hope you enjoy my photos, and I hope this helped. Cheers.